Hello and welcome in today's lecture. For today, we have chosen the topic Agricultural Distribution, Regional Spread and Features 200 BC to 700 AD. Dear students, the focus of the current study will be on establishment of early states and agriculture, medieval agrarian developments and newer tools of agricultural integration, reclamation, irrigation and crop production, geopolity and agricultural development, ecozones, agrarian frontiers. Imperial measures led to the development of agricultural infrastructure and the ensuing surge in agrarian expansion. Even the driest regions of peninsular India underwent agricultural colonization as the entire process was formalized. The development, interaction, and integration of ecozones in early peninsular India can be better understood through the lens of state formation. Establishment of early states and agriculture. The process of state formation offers insight into the development, interaction, and integration of ecozones in early peninsular India. Three major phases in the process of state formation have been identified in the Tamil region. In the proto-historic period, developed micro-ecozones were ruled by clan-based commands. These microzones were habitats of proto-historic communities. In the Tamil anthologies, one finds references to the macro-ecozones which were produced out of interaction among micro-ecozones. In the early historic period, these macro-ecozones were integrated under the secondary state of Satvahansas. The Pallava period ushered a marked change in the organization of agrarian production. While the Varnik rulers were unable to use force on peasants for production in the earlier period, the Brahmins exhibited better management as a corporate body. The Brahman landowners efficiently managed the labor, both for agriculture and arts and crafts. These Brahmins in the Pallava Chola period wielded power and status as a recipient of land endowments, enjoyed privileges over it. The warring strength of Pallava Chola is attributed to a developing peasant economy under the Brahmins. Attempts to redefine the nature of the Mauryan state have highlighted the unevenness of the constitutive elements of the empire. It is believed that core metropolitan area initiated the process of conquest and control of diverse regions with differential access to the resources. An agricultural rich tract, mineral rich stretches, and trade routes, etc. Forest dwelling communities were either forcibly subdued or placated and tamed, depending upon the possibilities of the relevant strategy. The state was forced with the need for agrarian surplus as well as forest produce. Agrarian surplus required forest clearance and colonization of new areas. On the other hand, the forests were also to be protected for their material value. The rule of the Satvahanas extended to Maharashtra, Karnataka, and Andhra Pradesh, roughly corresponding to the commonly understood region of the Deccan. The region certainly had the potential and the productive capacity which might have caught the attention of the metropolitan state of the Mauryas. The shift of iron epicenters outside the Gangetic belt and the search for newer resource areas brought Ashoka to the peninsula. Kautilya's Arthashastra, a text on political economy, highlights the profitable nature of the southern trade route as it passed through gold mining areas and abundant in precious items like rubies, pearls, and diamonds. The Mauryans established their provincial capital at Sorvanagari in Karnataka. They issued their rock edicts in the area. Fertile alluvial plains of the Krishna-Godavari Delta and the mineral-rich Eastern Ghats facilitated the pre-state developments in Andhra Pradesh. Similarly, the southern Deccan had dispersed fertile pockets. However, not all the pockets of Deccan attest to evidence about Mauryan contact. Though iron was present in Deccan, it could not be used effectively for agrarian expansion owing to certain ecological factors. Medieval agricultural developments. In the early medieval period, agrarian developments can be seen in the Deccan Plateau, Andhra Plains, Tamil region, and the coastal strip from Maharashtra to Kerala. The peasant economy, which was confined in the early peninsula only to Maruttam, did separate into other ecozones also. Brahmadiyas and the temples emerged as instruments of agrarian expansion. The creation of such institutions was accompanied by the clearance of forests, construction of irrigation devices, and management of cultivating labor in the areas, hitherto unknown for the growth of agriculture. Agricultural infrastructure was increasingly being created. The agrarian expansion was a continuous process, and the emergence of newer institutions facilitated the integration of the existing agrarian regions. Pallavas and Pandyas did adopt and modify North India elements to specific agrarian situation of their regions. As implementers of stone sluice technology, they made a major contribution for artificial irrigation. Advanced tools of agricultural integration. Nadus, which evolved out of peasant settlements, can be considered basic agrarian units in early medieval Tamil land. In the early medieval centuries, their numbers rose in all the Tamil macro-regions. Different ecological zones differed in their access to the utilization of water resources. While the riverine regions like the Kaveri Delta necessitated the adoption of flood control mechanism vis-a-vis embankments and canals in their drier and upland area, tank and reservoirs were constructed. The process of expansion was at times accompanied by the conflict between different subsistence strategies, pastoralists and shifting cultivators clashing with plough cultivators. Depending upon the available technology, human initiatives and convergence of historical factors, the plains opened to agriculture in a phased manner. The process of such an expansion can be seen in the Pallava region of Palar-Chayar Valley and the Pandya region of Vaigai Tamraparani Valley. Though the term Nadu means cultivable land, it was generally applied to settlements irrespective of the degree and level of agrarian development. Periyadu, a supralocal organization of agriculturists, emerged in the 11th century AD in the drier areas north of Kaveri and continued to operate till the 14th century AD. Another division created by realigning Nadus into larger units primarily for revenue purposes was Valanadu. Valanadus were delineated based on natural boundary markers like water courses. Brahmadiyas or land endowments to Brahmanas were institutionalized in Andhra and Deccan at an early date, that is 4th century AD, while the Tamil region witnessed such developments only by the 7th century AD. These endowments were located in virgin land or already cultivated land. In the Pallava Pandya regions, the reservoirs with stone sluice were developed by the ruling class and maintained by local bodies known as Sabha and the Ur. These endowments were made in the vicinity of water bodies in all the Nadus. The Nadus under Pallavas evolved within Kottams, pastoral cum agricultural regions, reclamation, irrigation, and crop production. There were three significant aspects of agrarian expansion in the early medieval period. Number one, improvement in crop quality and quantity. Number two, horizontal expansion of cultivation through reclaimed and varied pockets, forest removal, and formation of rural villages. And third and the final one, creation of irrigation facilities. Bertenstein identified three episodes of relatively stable agrarian integration in South India from the 9th to 19th century. The reduction of forests and the expansion of regularly cultivated land was a continuous process. As in any developing tropical agrarian system, the clearing of the forest was one of the standard methods for expansion. This kind of change in environment may therefore be considered a regularized process in which the tempo of expansion is a factor of vital importance. In the Eastern Ghats, the settlements in the dense forests with shrub savanna and thorny thickets remained non-agricultural. However, those on the foothills had natural catchments where tanks could be constructed with lesser effort and agricultural activities could be carried out. It has been suggested that peasants themselves could do reclamation of virgin or wasteland within settled villages, while the forest clearance and creation of irrigational infrastructure was possible only through the above-mentioned institutions like the Brahmadayas and the temples. Kakatiya rulers and their intermediaries in Andhra were credited with the forest clearance and reclamation in the Telangana plateau. There is a rich corpus of epigraphic data from peninsular India substantiating the process of extension of cultivable tracts. The land endowments record mention several boundary markers like water bodies, plant and trees, and forests, village communities, besides referring to land size, productive capacity, and the nature of the soil. Irrigation received special attention in the early medieval period. The development of sluice ware in channels to draw water from tanks and rivers did not develop before the Pallava period. The sluice ware of tanks, which began to develop from the 8th century onwards, increased agricultural productivity. In pre-Pallava times, surface irrigation or its modified techniques of Pichotha was a dominant practice. Another important development was the creation of channels from the rivers to feed the tanks. Developments in the drainage system were directly related to wet cultivable produce, other crops, production of which increased in the early medieval period included an extension of cultivation to widely grown products. Garden products, wine crops, and several new crops are included in this category. Because of demographic pressure, varieties of millet like finger millet and foxtail millet and certain inferior grains like jowar came to be cultivated on large scale. The production of jaggery was a long-drawn process and it assumed commercial propositions by the 10th century. The increased cultivation of betel leaves and areca nuts in the 11th century AD has been linked to their ritual consumption in the temples. The western coast was also popular for the production and trade of spices in general and black pepper in particular. Coconuts, widely known for their ritual status, were introduced to the peninsula in the early Christian centuries. Orange was probably a native of Kashmir and was diffused in peninsular India around the 10th century AD. It was cultivated in Karnataka before the 10th century AD, from where it was diffused to the Arab world. Geopolity and agricultural developments. The geopolitical context of important dynasties in the early medieval centuries provides useful insight into agrarian specificities in peninsular India. The core region of the Hoysala and the Kakatiya dynasty, located in the modern districts of Hassan and Madhya and Warangal respectively, recorded low rainfall, 30 inches per year, that depended on the generation of royal revenue. The proportion of high agricultural based on irrigation was about 1/5 of sown acres in the Hoysala kingdom and 1/8 in the Kakatiya dominion. The ratio of cultivated to non-cultivated land was less than half in both these regions. Pandyas and the Cholas, on the other hand, were located in the rich riverine plains, providing extended zones of cultivation and were thus more densely populated. Vaigai Basin in the 14th century imported money, coconuts, and fish. Cholas used grain surplus to establish exchange relations extending up to Malaysia. Ecozones, agricultural frontiers. Studies on settlement histories while taking cognizance of agricultural specificities in terms of environmental factors and crop and irrigation factors also highlight the phased opening of agrarian front lines at a regional or even a micro-regional level. The process of the making of an agrarian region in early medieval Andhra brings out various features of the agrarian expansion. The proliferation of rural settlements in Andhra shows a phased agrarian expansion. Though agricultural activities continued in various pockets since early times, qualitative and quantitative expansion did not take place before the early medieval period. Coastal Andhra formed a paddy monoculture. In the pre-10th century AD, dynasties like Eastern Chalukyas did not venture into Rayalaseema and Telangana and were governed by the high revenue yielding area factor. The environmental settling of Telangana and Rayalaseema was not conducive to the growth of agriculture. In Telangana, the rainfall was uncertain and the soil could not retain moisture. In this region, Kakatiyas promoted agriculture through the construction of large tanks and the reclamation of land in the districts of Khammam, Mahbubnagar, Nalgonda, and Warangal. Though the process of reclamation also continued in the Rayalaseema districts like Kudappa, Kurnool, and Chittor, the regions as a whole lagged and did not open to agriculture on the considerable scale before the Vijayanagara period. Production of dry crops in Rayalaseema is attested by the epigraphic references to Nila, Chinu, Polam, and Variapolam. Within Andhra, the coastal area has been characterized by a wet ecological zone, Telangana a mixed ecological zone, and Rayalaseema as the region of dry farming. However, exceptions existed in all these ecological zones. In the coastal region, the eastern lowland border stood in contrast to the elevated western position. In Telangana, the central and eastern parts witnessed a steady rise in tank construction. Red soil could become productive only with wet cultivation. The epics of Palna Trivula Katha and Kattammaraju Katha point out to limitations of fragile ecology and the conflict between different subsistence methods over resource use. Palanadu country, identified within the modern state of Guntur, acted as buffer zone and had a geographical identity of its own. Here the staple crop were sorghum and millet. The epic of Kattammaraju Katha describes the conflict between migrant pastoralists and agriculturists in the 14th century. In Salem district, Tamil Nadu, an arid region in the northwestern part, two phases of agrarian expansion in the river valley have been identified between the 10th and mid-14th century AD. However, in the mid-16th century, even the driest portion of Salem was also open to agriculture. In the study of Tirunelveli, specifically from an agricultural point of view, three ecological zones vis-à-vis the wet, the mixed and the dry have been identified. The wet zones were established by 1000 AD. The dry zone depended on the mercy of rains and was favorable only to the cultivation of millet. This zone, rich in black and sandy soil, was colonized in the 14th century AD with migrants from other places including the Andhra hinterland. The mixed zone, abounding in elevation and red soil, had moderate rainfall. Ramappa Lake in Mulug Taluk of Warangal district was surrounded by hills on three sides, and its bund on one side had a height of 56 feet and a length of 2000 feet. In the Narsimapet Taluk of the same district, Pakalla Lake had a dam made of laterite, pebble and earth, about 1.5 kilometers long, from which 40 channels were created. The process of proliferation of rural settlements and emergence of agrarian region, which began on a considerable scale under the dynasties of Hoysalas and Kakatiyas and Pandya Cholas, was accelerated in the 16th century Vijayanagara period. New agricultural frontiers were opened in the drier upland stretches, and market-oriented production of cash crops like cotton and indigo began. Settlement studies which classify phase developments in various ecozones do not exhaust the possibility of variations. Environmental determinism may relegate the human factor to the status of a passive recipient of agricultural change. Dear students, the oldest pre-Iron Age agricultural economy can be referred to as an agro-pastoral economy, since it was characterized by a range of subsistence practices like millet cropping, cow and sheep pastoralism, and wild animal hunting. Throughout the Chalcolithic cultures, the economy was agro-pastoral in nature. According to studies, the Chalcolithic Deccan's unequal agricultural growth in mostly due to the black cotton soil. The megalithic or iron economy has been variously described as settled agrarian, pastoral, nomadic agriculture, or semi-sedentary agriculture because to the lack of obvious patterns. Pastoralism dominated the early phase, and irrigated culture grew more prevalent in the riverine regions, and new areas were colonized in the later phase. Furthermore, the early and later medieval was marked by newly emerging instruments of agrarian expansion, the creation of agricultural infrastructure, and the opening of even dry areas to agriculture. So that's all for today. See you in the next sitting with some another topic. Till then, goodbye and goodbye.